this is where we are with the technology, but that's okay. But anyway, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And welcome to the Houston Young Lawyers Foundation Law Day webinar. My name is Austin Muck. I am the general counsel for the engineering firm Bryant Consultants, and I'm the co-chair for today's Law Day virtual luncheon. 61 years ago, in 1958, President Dwight D. Eisenhower established Law Day as a way to challenge Americans to understand how the rule of law impacts their lives and to develop the knowledge and skills necessary to participate in democracy. Now, Law Day is celebrated nationally each year to honor the rule of law. Law Day provides an opportunity to understand how law and the legal process protect our liberty, strive to achieve justice, and contribute to the freedoms that all Americans share. This year's Law Day theme is advancing the rule of law now. And it reminds us that we, the people, share the responsibility to promote the rule of law, defend liberty, and pursue justice. Generally, rule of law is a principle under which all persons and institutions are accountable to laws that are widely and publicly shared, equally enforced, and independently adjudicated. These basic ideas emerge from centuries of traditions and law, but also align with contemporary standards in human rights and international law. We are all familiar with common expressions such as "no man is above the law," or "everyone is equal in the eyes of the law," or "the government of laws and not a government of man." But during a time of division, polarization, civil unrest, the rule of law provides opportunities to sustain the nation and implement real change. The World Justice Project describes the rule of law as a durable system of laws, institution, norms, and community, and commitment that delivers accountability for government and for individuals, just laws, open government, and accessible justice. Today, we have an impressive panel of 3 speakers who you all just saw on the screen briefly, and we're thankful that they're joining us to provide insight on the rule of law in our society, including the development and response to past societal demands, such as the COVID pandemic, and what the panelist predicts for the future as we continue to advance the rule of law. So thank you guys all for joining us today as we celebrate Law Day. As in our tradition, this event is hosted in partnership with the Houston Young Lawyers Association, the Houston Bar Association, and the Houston Young Lawyers Foundation. We will begin our presentation and panel discussion. And we encourage you all to join in by looking on the right side of the screen. You'll see a Q&A button. And we ask that you submit your questions for the panelists to be asked at the end. And then after the presentation, we will recognize the award winners from the Houston Bar Association Law Week and the winners of the Houston Young Lawyers Association's Alumni Awards. So at this time, it's my pleasure to introduce our distinguished panelists for today's discussion. And so our first panelist is Dean Leonard Baynes. He's currently the Dean of the University of Houston Law Center and a professor at law. He received his Bachelor's of Science from New York University and then an MBA and JD from Columbia University. As the 9th Dean of University of Houston Law Center, Dean Baynes brings a national reputation as a communications law scholar with specializations in business, media, and diversity issues. He manages more than 60 full-time faculty and oversees 12 centers and institutes, including the number 6 Health and Law Policy Institute and number 7th ranked Institute for Intellectual Property and Information Law, and the number 9 ranked part-time program. Dean Baynes was inducted into the Minority Media and Telecommunications Council Hall of Fame, where former FCC Commissioner and MMTC Chair described him as a champion for diversity. Dean Baynes previously served as the inaugural director of the Ronald H. Brown Center for Civil Rights and Economic Development at St. John's University School of Law. In 2010, Dean Baynes received the Diversity Trailblazer Award from the New York State Bar Association. And in 2019, he accepted the American Bar Association Alexander Award on behalf of the Pre-Law Pipeline Program. In 2019, Dean Baynes was the recipient of the Council on Legal Education Opportunity, Inc.'s EDGE Award, and the John Mercer Legal Education Leadership Award from the National Black Pre-Law Conference and Law Fair, and was named a Diversity Champion by the National Diversity Council. In 2020, Dean Baynes was named to the Lawyers of Color Power List by the Lawyers of Color Foundation. During his deanship, he was named one of the nation's top 100 most influential lawyers of color, and he was awarded the Houston Lawyer Association's Robert L. King Excellence in Education Award. Thank you for joining us, Dean Baynes. Second panelist is Justice Brett Busby, who's a justice on the Texas Supreme Court. And Justice Busby, if you could, thank you. After graduating with high honors from Duke University and Columbia Law School, he served as a law clerk at the U.S. Supreme Court. He's an experienced appellate litigator and former partner at Bracewell in Houston. Justice Busby served on the 14th Court of Appeals from 2012 to 2018, and then Governor Greg Abbott appointed him to the Supreme Court of Texas in February of 2019, and the Texas Senate confirmed him unanimously. He was elected to a full term in November 2020. In 2018, the Texas Association of Civil Trial and Appellate Specialists recognized Justice Busby's judicial service by naming him Appellate Judge of the Year. He has also received the Judge of the Year Award from the Hispanic Bar Association of Houston and the Outstanding Mentor Award from the Houston Young Lawyers Association. Justice Busby is dedicated to improving the justice system and the legal profession. His fellow Texas appellate lawyers recently elected him as chair of the State Bar of Texas Appellate Section. He works closely with the Texas Access to Justice Commission, which helps assure that Texans with limited means have access to basic civil legal services. He previously served on the Texas Multi-District Litigation Panel and chaired the State Bar Committee on Pattern Jury Charges. Justice Busby is also active in the community. He's a senior fellow of the American Leadership Forum and has served on the boards of the Postdoc School of the Houston Symphony. And our third panelist today is Miss Lynne Liberato. And if you could please join the screen, Miss Liberato. She is senior counsel at Haynes and Boone here in Houston. She received her Bachelor's of Science from Sam Houston State University and Master's of Arts in Commerce from Texas A&M. She then graduated from the South Texas College of Law. From all three higher education institutions, she has received recognition and awards as distinguished alum. Ms. Liberato was elected the first woman president of the Houston Bar Association and was later elected president of the State Bar of Texas. A longtime partner in the appellate section of Haynes and Boone, this year she assumed the title of senior counsel. She has led teams in some of the most significant appeals and trials in Texas, including arguing to the United States Supreme Court, acting as lead lawyer representing the NFL during the Houston Super Bowl, and leading pro bono appellate team fighting a challenge to restroom access authorized by the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance. Ms. Liberato co-authors with Judge David Hittner's Summary Judgments in Texas, which is often called the Bible of Summary Judgments. Ms. Liberato includes among her proudest achievements, her selection as Volunteer of the Year for the United Way of Greater Houston, the winner of the ADL Jurisprudence Award, the recipient of the Justice Ruby Kless Sondock Award from the HPA, and the winner of the Greg Coleman Appellate Lawyer of the Year Award from the Texas Bar Foundation. She's the only practicing lawyer to have served as the community campaign chair for the United Way and was the chair of its board. So thanks everyone for attending, and thank you for our panelists for joining us. We're truly honored to have you with us. And as a reminder to the attendees, there's a CLE course credit that we will email out afterwards if you didn't get it in the lobby. It was posted in the lobby. But we will send out an email and post it on the HYLA website. So with that introduction, again, I'm truly honored to share the stage with you guys. And my first question is going to be directed towards Justice Busby. Justice Busby, the principle, or excuse me, the theme for this year's Law Day is advancing the rule of law now. And in my introductory remarks, I gave a general description of what that means. I think we all probably have a pretty good idea of what the rule of law means generally, but it's also a difficult phrase to define. Can you help us define that?
Sure. Well, thank you, Austin, and thanks to HYLF and HYLA for pulling this together virtually so that we can all be together in this format again this year. It's great to be back with my friends in Houston, and a special honor to share the stage with my friends Lynne and Lynne. Just want to thank Austin and Kristen for their hard work. So the definition of the rule of law, I just want to unpack the definition a little bit that you mentioned earlier. One of the important aspects of that, obviously, is that we're all accountable to the laws, that no one is above the law, including our government, of course. And that was part of the history of the rule of law. You know, the concept of due process and due course of law is definitely bound up in that the government can't deprive you of your rights without due course of law. So accountability to the law is certainly an important aspect of it. I think it's also very important that laws are widely and publicly shared and equally enforced so that everyone knows what the law is, that it's clear, consistent, stable, and predictable. We've all been in a position of advising clients on what the law is, and there's nothing that they hate to hear more than, well, this court says this and that court says that, and where is this case again? And you know, we're not really sure. So you know, there's a real value to having a consistent and stable and predictable legal system where everybody knows what their rights and obligations are. And in terms of equal enforcement, it's also very important that we have similar treatment of similarly situated persons, so that you know, no matter what part of the state you're in, what your background or business or profession may be, or whatever it is that brings you into a relationship with the law, that you're treated similarly to somebody of a different background in a different part of the state under the law. That's part of what we get to do with our petition for review process at the court, is be sure that we're resolving those conflicts and being sure that the law applies equally across the state. Also, another aspect of that, obviously, is open government and having a fair process that's not only fair as a substantive matter, but is seen to be fair, and that people have an opportunity to participate. And there's a value to the process as well as the outcome. One thing that wasn't mentioned in the definition earlier, but I think is a really important part of this too, is that law is accessible for all in terms of access to justice, which is something I've spent a lot of time on through the course of my career, and I'll expand on that a little bit later in some of the other questions. And then finally, that law be independently adjudicated, that the courts are giving all parties a fair hearing and deciding the arguments they raise based on the law as it is and the record before the court. And also, so that to me those are some of the most important aspects of the rule of law. But it takes a durable system also of laws and institutions and norms and community commitment to advance the rule of law. And I know we're going to have a chance to talk about several of those aspects today.
Thank you, Justice Busby.
You know, one way I think of what you're talking about, Justice Busby, and you really nailed it, is that there's this overall concept that no one's above the law, which Austin said and that you said too. And so that kind of makes a nice, if you will, tagline. But then there's all these building blocks that go into this institution, almost, if you will, the rule of law. And so these are all things as lawyers we hear, whether it's independence of the judiciary, I think the presumption of innocence, you said access to justice, of course, right to a fair trial, checks and balances in our government, openness. You know, it's the sum of those parts. At least that's one way that I like to think about it. And all of those lead to something that's kind of easy to say, but is complex, and it's one of the reasons we treasure it as we do.
And I'd like to add on specifically on the equality of the law. And I give you an example to bring it home. So I went to visit my brother in Sarasota, Florida, and his wife, and they lived in a gated community. And I had never gone to a gated community before. I live in New York, and there's not very many gated communities. And so I flew to Tampa, drove from Tampa to Sarasota, and I went to the gated community, and the security guard, when I first got there, was a woman of color. I'm not sure what her background was. And she said, "Oh, yeah, I know your brother and sister-in-law, they're terrific. They told me you're coming. Go ahead, go in. That's great, you're here." And I was like, "Oh, this is really so wonderful. I mean, she's treating me so nicely. This is really great." And then, you know, I went out like one night to do stuff, and then I came back, and it was a white male security guard, and he says to me, he was very polite, but he said, "Show me your ID, etc." And he, you know, took my name down, called my brother and sister-in-law, etc. And so that's sort of the arbitrariness, I think, of, and the equal treatment of this that we have to be concerned about. So it left me puzzled, you know, as I'm saying, well, it seems like I'm getting, what is the standard here, right? What is the standard in terms of entry to this place? And what should it be? And are either of them acting outside the standard? So that's sort of part of the challenge, I think, in terms of how the law is applied. It's great to talk about the law in a sort of abstract way, but when it applies to certain people or different groups, it's something that's really important for us to sort of think about. Now, that doesn't mean that the law has to be, in my view, totally blind, because I think that also raises issues, because we have to be conscious of the impact the law may have on different groups of different people. But I think that's the complexity that we have as we aspire to this system where there's accountability, there's this law that treats everybody the same, but very often in terms of application, it may not necessarily treat people the same.
Great, thank you, Dean Baynes. You know, you touched on, well, all three of you really, you touched on, you know, principles that we're familiar with, having, you know, living in America, growing up in America, and, you know, Dean Baynes, you touched on maybe some difficulties really in applying the rule of law in America. You know, one of the founders, or I guess an author during the time of the founding, Thomas Paine, said, "In America, law is king." But, you know, it hasn't always, I guess the rule of law has been challenged a lot throughout our history as America. And what are some ways, Dean Baynes, where you've seen the rule of law challenged and it's sustained, or challenged but then the rule of law failed? And I'm sorry, you're on mute, Dean Baynes. You're muted. Okay.
I am sorry about that. Now I'm no longer on mute. So I'm sorry about that. I think that, you know, one of the challenges that we have in the United States is that we have, you know, some commentators called it the original sin in our Constitution of what we've done with race and slavery. In fact, slavery was hardly mentioned in the Constitution, but people knew it existed, and people knew they, you know, of all sides, with Northerners, Southerners, and founding fathers, knew there was something wrong about it. And, you know, the only places actually in our Constitution, or the unamended original version, are in two sort of spots, and it's sort of it's hinted at, right? One is the importation of slaves. You know, this is Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1, that basically limits the federal government from actually preventing the importation of slaves, but doesn't use the word slaves, it uses persons, but it's understood that those were African people of African descent and were enslaved. The second place is you know, which you probably learn more about in history, is the 3/5 clause, right, of the Constitution, which basically provides under Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, that for the purpose of representation, 3/5 of each state's enslaved populations, they called it other persons, was to be added to the population for those purposes. And that was allowed for, you know, increased representation in the House of Representatives, the Electoral College, and for taxes. There was no equal protection clause in the original Constitution of the Bill of Rights. So Frederick Douglass, as it was a noted emancipated slave and Black abolitionist of the time, used the Declaration of Independence to argue for equality of African Americans. And we all know the history that, you know, we had Dred Scott that basically said African Americans were not persons, were not citizens, had no rights. And it was not until you had the 14th Amendment, 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment to the Constitution that were adopted, allowed for some sense of equality, that equality was actually incorporated in the Constitution. But for almost 100 years, we know that that was interpreted as separate but equal. And in lots of parts of the United States, that meant that you couldn't go, blood races were separated in terms of schools and even water fountains. So it was not until Brown in 1954, with the adoption of Civil Rights Act and the adoption of Civil Rights Acts of 1960, that equal protection was actually interpreted more broadly to include people of color. So it took 100 years for us to get there. But as we've seen over the past year, we're still grappling with what equality means. We see it play out on video in our criminal justice system every day. Some say this is systemic racism. Some say there's just a few bad apples. Some blame people of color themselves because they're not lifting themselves up. But in any event, what we see is that there's certainly still disparities in our society, significant underrepresentation of people of color in many areas of American life, including among our lawyers, judges, law professors, and law students. So I think that's one area where I think there certainly has been a challenge, and it is a fundamental fault line in our United States history, that where people papered over it until the Civil War and have been, for the past really American history, been fighting over what equality means, especially for its citizens of diverse backgrounds. Oops, sorry, into.
You know, I think that, you know, recently, of course, and some of it's obviously, I think all of it's rooted in from the past, but I think we've seen the positives and the negative things that have happened. I think that the storming of the Capitol on January 6th showed what happens when people don't trust the rule of law. And regardless of what else one may think about that, it does seem to me pretty clear that the people who did that did not trust our institutions, did not trust the application of the rule of law. And so for them and what they did, that was a failure. And it shows the incredible bad things that can happen when people don't believe in the law and don't honor the rule of law for reasons that in some sense we've talked about, the respect for the law and the institutions. I think the flip side of that, it relates to the legal challenges. To the last presidential election, virtually every court, and it didn't matter whether the judges came from a Republican background, a Democratic background, or an independent background, virtually every court applied the rule of law in making their decisions, and they did so in the face of tremendous political pressure.
Yeah, I think that's an important, all important observations. And another example that we've seen recently, obviously, is with the death of George Floyd. And we had, you know, a lot of protests around the country following that. And, you know, some were violent and some were not. And then more recently, we had the legal process play out in court where one of the officers was convicted of murder. And so, you know, I think part of what we can all do to advance the rule of law is, you know, obviously condemning violence, but then building that trust in our institutions to handle issues. And you know, through the court system is one way. Public advocacy also has an important role to play in that, and sometimes political advocacy as well to help build up those institutions that help support and preserve the rule of law.
Yeah, that's a great point, Justice Busby. And you know, all three of you have, you know, you brought forth areas, you know, both generally and specific areas that, you know, why it's important to advance the rule of law, right? And so, Ms. Liberato, I mean, in your view, I mean, I guess we can all say it's probably necessary to advance the rule of law, but I guess, you know, why is it, and what drives its advancement?
Well, I think the rule of law is something that we strive for. It's a goal. It's something that's never fully achieved. And so it's you know, we always want to make it better, and we want it to work better, and we want people to embrace it and trust it. So that's an unending process. And I think the rule of law adjusts under changing circumstances. In doing some research, what I've found that the scholars in this say is that there is a procedural aspect of this, and that's a lot of what we've talked about. You know, that the laws are publicly promulgated, equally enforced, an impartial judiciary, but there's also a substantive part, and that is that people must feel, and I believe Dean Baynes was talking about this, that the laws are fair. And our sense of fairness and what's more than acceptable, what's appropriate, really changes over time. Certainly, one of the most profound examples is in the area of civil rights, but it's also marriage equality, transgender rights, and even something that's important that sounds mundane, intellectual property rights. You know, what should be protected, what shouldn't, so there are multiple things, but the point being is that our concepts and our understanding, which we hope always gets better and always gets more amenable to equality and fair treatment, that changes. And so the substantive aspect, in addition to the procedural aspect of the rule of law, modifies, is and appropriately should modify and grow to fit those changed perceptions.
Dean Baynes, were you going to add something?
I was. I think that what you find is that in societies that have a strong rule of law, it's usually associated with higher GDP per capita, better rates of basic health outcomes, and relative peace and prosperity among the population. So it's certainly something that we should all achieve, you know, and strive for, is to make sure that, you know, this nation upholds its principles, which, you know, it is a work in progress, and it certainly is moving toward justice since its inception. And that's really something that's very, very important. And for the other countries of the world to also move in this direction, because it makes for better outcomes for our citizens and the population.
Well, the three of you guys have such diverse and remarkable backgrounds leading to where you guys got today. But I'll start with you, Ms. Liberato, but I'd love to hear from all of you, really. But you know, in what ways have you interacted with the rule of law in your career?
I think as lawyers, we interact with it every day. And I know you're asking for specific examples, and I'll give you some of those in a minute. But the thing that and this comes from being, I know, a bar groupie in part, but it's, I think, allowed to see in so many instances in interacting with non-lawyers or people who aren't part of the legal assistance, how they look to us to form their perception of the rule of law. And there's never a time, whether you're at a party or interacting, you know, at a store, if somebody knows you're a lawyer, they will see you and your actions through that prism of being a lawyer, and that will influence their perception of the legal system, and of course that which is fundamental to the rule of law. So I think that our behavior as lawyers, as judges, as educators of new lawyers, as court staff, every one of those things, I think more than anything else, the bottom line is the example that you set is going to affect the rule of law. Now, one example I had about the rule of law, and it gets a little bit into a later discussion, but when I was bar president, state bar president, I got to go to Hungary. And this was a long time ago. It was, I think, 2000, maybe 2001. I think it was 2000. And they were just then developing their legal system. And the idea was that, we had a group of lawyers and judges that went over there, and we were going to advise them and how, kind of help them as they developed their justice system. And it seems so obvious now, but I'd never thought of it until then. They were so excited about having a justice system because they saw it as economic development. And that, I can remember them saying, if you can't enforce a contract, you can't have business. If you can't protect intellectual property, you can't have innovation. If you don't have enforcement of worker safety, that's going to affect your whole work pool. And so I think that was in seeing that and hearing it from people, this was really the important part, hearing it from people who didn't have what we totally take for granted was a real eye-opener. And it's something to remember as we talk about, the benefits of the rule of law. And certainly they're these, things we hold dear and that are kind of, I don't want to say pie in the sky, but they're real practical benefits to the rule of law that go beyond talking about, it's great stuff and we all ought to do it and we're a wonderful country because we have it. But doggone it, it helps business and allows us to have the success we have as a country, and other countries want that too. And I'm glad to see both Justice Busby and Dean Baynes smiling and nodding. When I look out at a panel like this, I'm like, I want to see some nodding. So thank you, gentlemen. And Austin too, but he has to nod.
Well, I'll go ahead, Dean. Would you like to add something?
Yeah, I think, I would probably talk about as an educator that, it gives me incredible pleasure to be able to teach students how to identify the rule of law and how to interpret it. I think that's why I actually ended up becoming an educator, and for them to sort of see the distinctions that may exist and sort of see some of the areas of law that may need work, that they could develop, that they could advocate for, that they could propose rules for. And I think that that is really just the beauty of this particular position as dean. Now I don't teach as much, hardly at all, but I'm able to select and help select really incredible faculty members who are very, very smart and capable, and admit students who have will be bright and talented lawyers, and work with incredible alumni. And so it's really a great way, in that way, to steward the rule of law, but a little bit more indirectly through other individuals.
And I'll just add from my personal experience, one of the issues that I've had a chance, been very fortunate to work on through the course of my career is access to justice. And of course, we have a right to counsel in criminal cases, but not in civil. And the issue here is being sure, how do we make the promise of the rule of law real for our fellow Texans? Because many of them can't afford a lawyer to help them conduct their essential business in the civil court system. Issues involving housing, children's welfare, domestic violence, sexual assault, employment, government benefits. There are over 5.2 million Texans who are eligible for basic civil legal services based on their income or lack of income, but there aren't enough legal aid and pro bono volunteer lawyers to help even that population. And there are many more Texans living just above the poverty level who don't qualify for those services, but can't afford to hire their own counsel. And of course, we've only seen those needs grow during the pandemic and after the winter storm. So what are some of the things that we can do to help those people? Well, the HBA and Houston Volunteer Lawyers and Houston Young Lawyers are doing a lot to help them through clinics and pro bono representation. That's a very important piece of this. Funding is very important at the national level for legal aid, at the state level. Because with the decline of interest rates on IOLTA, we've needed to seek additional appropriations from the state legislature to help with funding for helping meet these needs. Also charitable, there are a lot of organizations that help raise money to to support providing legal services for these people who can't afford a lawyer. And then also systemic changes like rules and legislation that make it easier for lawyers to represent people pro bono. We had one go through just last legislative session that makes it easier for in-house counsel who aren't admitted in Texas to represent people pro bono, for example. And also changes that make it easier for people who are self-represented to navigate the court system and get their essential business done. And I'll just say one quick word about technology, because we've all had to learn how to do things remotely during the pandemic. And I think one of the silver linings of that is going to be enhanced access to justice for people. And there are a lot of reasons for that, but being able to conduct court proceedings online has resulted in dramatic increases in participation from some of these people who don't have counsel or who can't afford to hire counsel. And so there's a lot of potential there. And one of the things we're working on at the court now is what are the rules we're going to set going forward for use of technology after the pandemic so that the use is appropriate for efficiency and for access to justice, but we still have court proceedings in person when it's needed.
That's great, Justice Busby. So we're running short on time. It's going pretty quick. We do have one Q&A question right now in the box. I want to remind folks if you'd like to add a question, you can do so, although we may only have time for one. But before we get to that, Justice Busby, I just want to kind of follow up. And Krisina, I believe can you turn your microphone off, please? I want to follow up, Justice Busby, on what you were talking about. And, you know, in our audience today, when not only do we have attorneys, but we also have HBA award winners. And we have HBA award winners and high school students and elementary school students. I mean, what can just non-attorney Americans do to advance the rule of law in a few words?
Well, that's a great question, and congratulations to all of our award winners today. And I just want to say, you know, beyond condemning violence, obviously, which is important as we discussed earlier, you know, one of the things that everybody can do is support the independence of the judiciary, promote access to justice for all, and share these values with your family, your clients, your friends, and your community. And then, of course, as attorneys, we can ensure that people have remedies under the law by bringing cases in court, but also by strengthening the system that supports the rule of law through the political process, through the rulemaking process, through public advocacy. I think those are all things that we can all do to help continue to support and advance the rule of law.
That's great. And so we have one question in the Q&A feature, and we maybe have 2 minutes left. So I'm going to pose this one. And Dean Baynes, I believe you were the one. It appears to reference something you talked about earlier, so I'm going to pose it to you. And in just a few words, the question says, thank you so much for addressing the rule of law concerning the subject of civil rights. Do you believe in the idea of police reform to help ameliorate the fatal outcomes surrounding civil rights?
You know, I don't think I can take a position on any specific issue. I would really have to determine what the, you know, would be. What I would say is that, you know, what has happened over the course of the past year has caused a lot of people to have conversations, lawyers and many others. And I think the videotapes, you know, of situations that people may have disputed actually may have happened in the past, where people say, oh, well, you didn't see the whole tape or whatever. I think that, you know, it becomes more crystal clear that some things are happening. You know, how extensive it is, I can't really say. As I said, you know, some people say it's a bunch of bad apples. Some people say it's systematic. But I do think that, you know, when you call attention to it, it goes back to Justice Busby's last answer. You know, I think the rule of law, we see it in the civil rights movement. We see it in all the movements that Ms. Liberato talked about that have existed, is that people join together. The law is not just judges, it's not just lawyers, it's not just law professors, it's the people. And the people have a voice in changing the law. And the people can do that because we're a democracy, it's a representative government. We can do that through the legislators, through the advocacy, through however they want to make the change that's necessary and bring attention to these issues. Because if civil rights leaders, whether it's people focusing on racial justice, women's rights, LGBT rights, if people didn't advocate for their causes, law would never have changed. It's people bringing their voices to the conversations, and often the law was not diverse enough to embrace those conversations. It's now much more diverse. The people who are in control and power, who are jurists, think about our state. I mean, is a state where you had sweat versus painter, that blacks weren't allowed into the public law schools. That was 70 years ago. So how, you're expecting a non-diverse judiciary, and they did eventually, the Supreme Court did, to do action, but it has to be the people. The power basically comes from the people in our system of government.
What a great way to end it, Dean Baynes. And I want to thank the three of you all for your great insight. I certainly learned a lot. And Kristen is finally able to join us, so we are glad for that too. And I'm going to pass it over to her, and I want to thank you guys again.
Well, we want to thank you too, Austin and Kristen, for organizing this. I'm very honored to be a part of this really august panel. I mean, Lynne and Justice Busby, Ms. Liberato, and it's just been amazing. So I'm really thankful for that opportunity.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Austin, for a wonderful introduction of Law Day, and of all of our speakers. For better or worse, I think all of us have learned over the past year the difficulties of navigating this virtual realm, and also how to readily react. So thank you, Austin, and everyone for the patience. Thank you, Dean Baynes, Justice Busby, and Ms. Liberato for your participation in today's event and for your insight into a very meaningful topic. For me, Law Day Luncheon is a reminder about our role in society and the importance of us as legal advocates and counselors. Every day when we come to work, we have the opportunity to continue advancing the rule of law in our society. At this time, it's my pleasure to present Krisina Zuñiga, President of the Houston Young Lawyers Association, and she's going to be making the presentation of the HYLA Annual Awards.
Thank you so much, Kristen, and for everyone for joining today. It is my distinct honor to present HYLA's annual awards this afternoon to our 3 award recipients, as well as our Diversity and Inclusion Scholarship recipients. I will start with the annual awards. The first is the Houston Young Lawyers Association Liberty Bell Award. This award is presented to a non-lawyer who is significantly engaged in community service, particularly service that promotes a better understanding of the law and an appreciation for the courts. There is no better candidate for this award than this year's recipient, Ellen Alexander. And I hope all of you will join me in congratulating her, and hopefully had a chance to visit with her during the table session at the beginning of this program. Ellen has worked with the federal judiciary for over 35 years. She started at the clerk's office for the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Texas, and eventually became the case manager for the Honorable David Hittner. And anyone who knows Judge Hittner knows that his courtroom is busy. He has had more jury trials than any other judge in the Southern District of Texas. And Ellen is the one who keeps everything moving. As Judge Hittner put it, she is integral to keeping civil and criminal matters on track in the federal judicial system. Outside of this busy job, Ellen spends most of her time giving back to the Houston community. She attends the Uvalde Baptist Church, where she teaches Sunday school and Bible school over the summer, often the only vacation she takes each year. Every week, Ellen volunteers as a baby holder in the neonatal intensive care unit at Texas Children's Hospital, and as a buddy at Small Steps Nurturing Center. And it makes perfect sense that Ellen would choose to spend her spare time this way, having personally spent some time around Ellen when I was a law clerk in the federal courthouse. She is a kind, beautiful soul, and it's no surprise that several of her recommenders were former law clerks who had the pleasure of working with her. Ellen, thank you for your service, and congratulations for being HYLA's 2020 to 2021 Liberty Bell Award recipient. The next award I'll announce is HYLA's Outstanding Mentor Award. The recipient of this award is such an outstanding mentor that included among his mentees who credit him for their success are people he never even worked with. That is Mr. Travis Torrance, part of the global litigation bankruptcy group at Shell Oil Company. Not only do dozens of young Houston lawyers consider Travis a mentor, but even more significantly, he has created programs and taken leadership roles to encourage mentorship by others. This year, Travis personally developed and even underwrote for the initial few events a mentorship program for LGBTQ+ Houston Bar Association members called Coaching Circles that his nominator referred to as a groundbreaking addition to the lives of the participants. And Travis, this was even some inspiration for HYLA's own mentorship circles that we launched this year. A few years ago, Travis worked with then HYLA director Christian Menefee to revitalize HYLA's Tomorrow Attorney Pipeline project, in which attorneys are sent to local high schools to discuss careers in the law. Travis currently serves as the treasurer of the National LGBT Bar Foundation, which is a national association of lawyers, judges, law students, and other legal professionals that promotes equity and justice in and through the legal profession for the LGBTQ+ community. And he is the only board member from Houston, among many other leadership roles that Travis has held and currently holds. In the community, he has been involved with nonprofits such as Bo's Place, AIDS Foundation Houston, and Lambda Legal. But what was most moving to me about Travis's nomination were the many personal testimonials from young lawyers about Travis, young lawyers who, like Travis, have achieved wild success in their short careers. It is my honor to award Travis with our Outstanding Mentor Award this year. And finally is the Houston Young Lawyers Association Outstanding Young Lawyer Award. And I have to say that I could not say enough nice things about our final award recipient, Anyedia Akpan. Anyedia has been a ray of light for HYLA and for me during a very challenging bar year. This year, Anyedia served as the co-chair of HYLA's Day of Service Committee, organizing 6 different multifaceted days of service during the course of the bar year, and even a week of service last fall. These volunteer and educational opportunities addressed a wide range of issues, including hunger relief, domestic violence, and racial injustice. And that wasn't all. Anyedia also helped with numerous other HYLA committees, including our Generation Generosity Committee, Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and more. She was, and I cannot emphasize this enough, instrumental to HYLA's success this year. While it seems like that could have been a full-time job, Anyedia does also have a full-time job with the Metropolitan Transit Authority of Harris County, where she serves as corporate counsel managing institutional compliance matters, audits, and contract administration. A colleague of Anyedia said this about her: "The Outstanding Young Lawyer Award was made for someone like Anyedia. She is a bright and enthusiastic young attorney who, during her relatively short time at Metro, has already achieved extraordinary successes and obtained the admiration of senior and seasoned colleagues for her work ethic, diligence, and collaborative approach to problem solving." Outside of HYLA and work, among other things, Anyedia serves as a board member for Justice for Children, a nonprofit child advocacy group that provides legal and social services to abused children, and volunteers with the HBA, including as an articles editor of the Houston Lawyer Journal, of which she will be the editor-in-chief next year. I am proud to consider Anyedia a friend and to recognize her truly outstanding work and accomplishments this year with HYLA's Outstanding Young Lawyer Award. Now, in my limited time left, I want to be mindful, of course, of all of your time and also the presentation that Charles still has to do. I would like to recognize the recipients of this year's revived and revamped HYLA Diversity and Inclusion Scholarships. And I'd like to recognize the HYLA Diversity and Inclusion Committee, specifically Glenn Duduru and Brittany Mandarino, who led the effort in putting together this scholarship program. I'm so proud that HYLA was able to award a total of $6,000 in scholarships this year to the following remarkable students and a recent law school graduate. To our Scholarship recipients, some of which are watching today, we wish you the very best of luck in your careers. I personally encourage you to stay involved with HYLA, and I look forward to following what I'm sure will be your continued success. Our $1,000 scholarship recipients are Charles Graham, a 2L at Thurgood Marshall School of Law, Gabriela Lopez, a 1L at Thurgood Marshall School of Law, and Eric B. Williams II, a 2L at South Texas College of Law. Our $500 scholarship recipients are Ni Vu, a 1L at the University of Houston Law Center, Chelsea Ogan, a 1L at the University of Houston Law Center, Shayla Lyles, a 3L at Thurgood Marshall School of Law, Cynthia Ofordil, a 3L at Thurgood Marshall School of Law, Oronye Adunze, a 2L at South Texas College of Law, and Markia Bordeaux, a recent graduate from South Texas College of Law. I will apologize if I mispronounced any of your names. I know that that can be upsetting sometimes. It happens to me all the time without having a T in my first name and with a tilde in the last name. So again, I apologize, but my most sincere congratulations. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for applying. Best of luck. Kristen, I will now kick it back to you, whoever's up next on the agenda. Thank you everyone for your support of HYLA at this event.
Thank you very much. That sounds wonderful, and congratulations to all the award winners. We now have Charles Shaw, who is with the Houston Bar Association, and he's going to give us a presentation and discuss the Houston Bar Association Law Week award winners.
Thank you so much, Kristen. First, I want to thank so much to the Houston Bar Association, the Law Week Committee, my co-chairs, Joe Lawson and Karen Lucan, and all of our generous sponsors this year, including AZA Law, Hughes PLLC, the Honorable Daryl Moore, and Marianne Sears. To show our awesome presentation, and first is the Law Day Contest winners, Advancing the Rule of Law Now. The photo contest is our first set of presentations. And first, second, and third place, all of them were amazing. The first place winner for the Houston Bar Association was 261.0044, Neglect, by Brianna Tobias. Both her and her teacher, Matthew Kirkpatrick, were awarded some money based off of this, and it's a great photo exemplifying the law. The second photo that we have is 58 Years and Still Dreaming by Amarian Reina. And this is also the first place winner for the State Bar of Texas's Law Day Photography Contest. Awesome entry. The third place winner is We by LaShawn Bolton of Carver Magnet High School, Aldine ISD. Honorable mentions, there are a number of them. And we honestly included all of these because we really just wanted to exemplify just how great they did. All of these pictures are going to be available along with all of the entries on the Houston Bar Association's Law Week website. Second is the K through second grade poster contest. And the first, second, and third place winners ironically won first, second, and third place as well at the State Bar of Texas. First, we have Fairness, Equality, and Kindness by Ryuki Huda, and her teacher is Olivia Hooper. They are of Fort Bend ISD. Second place, Gender Equality by Alessandra Zelaya, emphasizing the need to have every occupation represented. Third, Remember Bald Eagle. We are free, we are strong, we are courage by Naoki Hoda. And we have a number of honorable mentions here as well. Next is the third through fifth grade poster contest. In first place, we have Free Education by Perrine Alcoin of the Wide School. Teacher, Katie Garza. Second place, Equality Committee for an Anti-Racist Country. And this is by London Kasser, and it won second place at the State Bar of Texas's Law Day contest as well. Third, We the People by Logan Lynne. This is of University Prep, and it was the first place winner for the State Bar of Texas Law Day contest. And our honorable mentions. Our 6th through 8th grade poster contest, we have the first place winner, The First Amendment by Luna Baba of the Wide School teacher Katie Garza. And I want to stop here and emphasize, if you go to the Law Day website, you'll actually be able to zoom in and see the intricacies of all of this. The First Amendment is written all across her mask, and it truly is a gorgeous entry. Second was The Rule of Law is Equal to All by Gabrielle Melendi. Third, Standing Up for Equality by Shelby Morrison. And again, a number of honorable mentions, which were all excellent. For our special needs contest, our contest theme was Laws Help Us, and we had 2 winners here. The first place winner is Alicia Pineda of MacArthur High School and her teacher, Elliot Chow. And our second place winner was Manny Medina of MacArthur High School. For our special needs team poster contest, we actually had a unique situation where we had a tie for first place. And our first place teams were Riley Tehran, Jose Suarez, Juan Corralizales, Juan Vasquez, and Matthew Moreno, and their teacher, Elliot Chow. And our other first place entry was Eric Ramirez, Connor Allen, Elizabeth Roque, and Tyler Burrows and A. Arabello of Pearland High School, with Stacy Sandoval being their teacher. Our second place entry was Angel Oliveira, Sabrina Tittle, Leslie Valadez, Alicia Celis of MacArthur High School. And finally, our third place entry was Jesus Reboseno, Israel Salazar, and Abraham Banda of MacArthur High School. Next, we have our 9th through 12th grade essay contest. And I want to stop here and thank every judge and justice who participated in the judging of these contests. If you don't know, all of these entries are read by judges and they decide ultimately who the winner will be. It's a lot of time consuming work, and we thank you so much for everything you did in making this a possibility. Our first place winner was entered by Eric Lee, and the title of the entry was The American Law System, Improved but Not Perfect of DeBakey High School, and the teacher is Ms. Qian Zhang. Awesome entry, and it is available as well to read at the Houston Bar Association's Law Week contest. Second place is by Uma Patel. It is Eliminating Wealth and Race in Conviction Decisions for a Fair Rule of Law, also at DeBakey High School. And finally, our third place winner was Kimberly Richardson, The War on Americans, DeBakey High School. All of these are available to read online. They are great entries, and truly those students spent a lot of time making sure that they had everything put together and had very meaningful topics on the rule of law now. We also want to thank our sponsors, judges, poster outreach partners, including ABBA, MABA, and HISBA. Without them, we would receive way less entries, and we also receive a great diversity of perspective from those partners, and we cannot thank them enough. Thank you to everyone who participated this year in the Law Day contest, and thank you so much for participating here today.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you, everyone, for attending today and for everyone who has helped us put on today's Law Day virtual luncheon. I'd like to extend a special thank you to all of the members of the judiciary who participated in today's event as well. Last but not least, we would like to thank our 3 law firm sponsors who helped make this event possible: Sidley Austin, Beck Redden, and Hutton Andrews Kurth. Thank you very much. If you would like more information about contributing to or participating with the Houston Young Lawyers Foundation or with the Houston Young Lawyers Association, I encourage you to visit our websites. Thank you. This concludes the event.